On this episode of Three Key Insights.
The opportunity that I found when I got into the industry, it is often not appreciated, and I think that's part of the problem for us attracting individuals.
The auto industry is moving fast, and it's getting more complex. Success today takes more than instinct, it takes insight. Welcome to Three Key Insights with Sanjiv Yajnik, President of Capital One Auto. Today, Sanjiv welcomes Tony Molla, a leading technician advocate and automotive education expert. As a driving force behind national training standards at the ASE Education Foundation, he brings a powerful perspective to a crucial conversation about solving the talent shortage and maximizing fixed ops revenue.
Now, in my previous podcasts, we've talked to industry veterans who have said that given where the auto industry is going, where car buying and car selling is going, an incredibly important part of a dealership business is on the servicing end of it, on the service bays, on what happens after the sale. And that really creates a really great foundation to keep the business steady as you go through the ups and downs of the selling cycle. One of the big issues that we face today is that particular area of the dealership is under pressure from a talent perspective. But before we dive into that, Tony, welcome. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the position you're in and what drives you on this really, really important topic?
So I've been an advocate for the technicians my entire career. I was one. I turned wrenches. And my experience working with Chilton not only expanded my technical knowledge, but it showed me the importance of what information was going to be in the future coming. And that's what we're dealing with right now. This is just as computers were coming along in a big way. And it's a very different prospect to become an automotive technician than it was when I was doing it. Requires much more training, much more enthusiasm for the career. And they are in short supply, as you said. So I'm spending I always enjoyed working with the schools. I worked with schools in when I was in Virginia, but I'm pleased to be able to continue that work and on my own personal crusade to find the technicians we need for the future.
So, Tony, I'd love to dive a little further into the issues that we are facing and how you're solving it. But if we take a step back and just look at the auto industry and look at the dealerships, how important is it that a dealership should have a really strong service department from your perspective? And has it become less or more important over time?
Well, when I was running the business or running the service department for Fiat, I quickly learned that the sales department sold the first car, the service department sold all the others. But the more and more dealerships are depending on the back end to carry the load for all the fixed ops expenses. And to do that, you have to have qualified people working in your service department. I know the dealership I go to, they have openings. They have had openings for as long as I've owned the vehicle, and I've owned the vehicle for 3.5 years now. And it's very, very difficult to find the level of expertise that you need coming out of some of the high school programs, which are a little uneven in their preparation. One of the things that I'm doing with the Education Foundation is helping programs become accredited to a national standard. And these days, with technology advancing the way that it is, it's important that when you hire an entry-level technician, that they are trained up to a certain level where you can take it beyond that. So, right. But customer service is king. Again, you really have to pay attention to the consumer. And 50% of the folks that are bringing their cars in are female. And it's very important to keep that in the equation too. We're seeing more and more women becoming automotive technicians. And I know I found out when I was on the service desk, they make great service writers and still do. So
let's just start with the service department. You said, a dealership sells the first car and then the service department sells all the rest. from your perspective, from everything that you've seen, you've been in the industry a long time, you've seen many dealerships, you've seen groups. In general, do dealerships know or appreciate the value of the service department, and is enough attention paid to the service department from your perspective? And I want you to answer the question from, say, 20 years ago and then today. Just compare the two.
20 years ago, my experience was the service department was a necessary evil to most dealer principals. We tended to ignore the technicians back then. They were just, kind of background noise in the life of the dealership. But today's entry-level people and experienced technicians are looking as much for the dealership to invest in them and their success as the dealership wants them to invest in the dealership's success. So an important component, I think, that exists today that didn't exist as well as it should have back then is training. Having the capacity of taking a young individual out of school with a certain level of skills and then sending them to ongoing training to build those skills over the years and build their value to the dealership is crucial to success.
So again, I'm just sticking with, before we get to the actual technicians and what is required, if I'm reading you correctly, you're basically saying 20 years ago, it was kind of viewed as a necessary evil. So I would think the extrapolation of that is that the dealer principals, they really focus on the front end of the business much more than the back end of the business. But what I'm also drawing out from what you're saying is that today, the service end of the business is a much more strategic part of a dealership versus being there just for the sake of, convenience for the customer, servicing the vehicle, and so on.
That is correct. As I mentioned earlier, the dealerships, most of the ones that I know, are relying more and more on the service department to basically cover all of their fixed costs.
And what do you see happening in the service department that is going to be that impactful to the dealership? Is it the servicing of the cars? Is it that they help customers find new cars? Well, how do you see the service department adding to the safety, security, the success of a dealership today?
Well, the service experience is a chance to build trust and reliability, if you will, as a consumer. But I think it's also important to understand that the individual who is buying a vehicle from you again and brings it back to the dealership to have it serviced, they're going to base a lot of decisions on future purchases based on that experience. The experience they have when they're having their vehicle serviced again builds trust. It builds confidence in the dealership, and it builds a relationship, which we've always talked about. That all businesses are basically relationship businesses. That is, I think, more true in the automotive industry.
So it's a really strategic part of the dealership, and it is required for the dealership to do well. And it's not a nice to have. It's not a necessary evil. It is actually the service area of a dealership, from your perspective, is a core part of the economics of a dealership. It covers some of the fixed costs. That's where the customer makes a lot of choices about whether they're going to come back to the dealership to buy a car and so on. So now you've been talking a little bit about the talent and what is required. Why is there suddenly, a shortage of people who want to do that job?
Well, it's not so much a shortage of people who want to do the job as it is the job has become a lot more complicated than it used to be. At some point in the past, the educational system used what we used to call shop class as basically a dumping ground for underachievers. Nowadays, if you're a young person who wants to consider a career in the automotive industry as a technician, you're going to be training pretty intensively. We need the individuals with the same kind of time management and communication skills and attention to detail that you would normally find for those who were college bound, back in the day. And in fact, a lot of the high school programs can only they only have enough hours to train the individual up to a certain point. So it takes a lot more training. Sometimes a lot of the folks at high school level will go on to enhance their skills, particularly in diagnostics at the college level. And the real difference comes down to one word: technology. Vehicles have become much more computerized. And having an individual with the technical knowledge and knowing how to use the computerized testing equipment, et cetera, to make sure that those systems are functioning is really roughly equivalent to what you would find in something like a network engineer or, a computer technician. And what you know today will probably be obsolete in 3 to 5 years, and you need to keep training. And again, that's a key element to that strategic point that you mentioned about the service department. We keep improving our accounting systems and everything else to keep up with technology. We have to do the same thing for the folks that we expect to keep that technology functioning the way it should.
Basically, what you're saying is it's not a question of the supply, but the question of how that supply is trained. Because one of the things I've heard you say in the past is that there's a huge swath of technicians that are about to retire.
Mm-hmm.
And we really don't have a replacement volume coming in. Am I reading that incorrectly? Because what I hear you saying right now is there's a volume, but the quality of training is required. Is it both? Is it one? How do you see it?
Well, if you talk to someone in the industry, they'll tell you there's no shortage of warm bodies, okay? There's a shortage of qualified individuals. And that's the primary difference that we're talking about here. 50% of the people that were working on cars and trucks 10 years ago were baby boomers like myself, okay? And we started retiring at a horrendous rate 15 years ago. And I don't know that the educational system right now, again, they need to invest more at that level on the trades as well, which is how we got into the shortage that we're in now. And this is not just automotive, it's all of the trades. Simply because we as a society became focused on, you got to go to college, you got to get a degree, et cetera. And that's true for a lot of people. But the tradespeople who earn more than an individual with just a bachelor's degree were neglected. And I think that if there is a supply problem, it's not just having the right individuals and having the right programs. It's having enough of these training programs available to bring. We're training about 35 or 40,000 technicians a year now. We need, twice that number.
That really makes sense. So basically, the training has to keep up, and you've got to be attracting people. How good are these jobs? In other words, what is the earning capacity of some of these jobs?
That's a problem and an opportunity. If you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average salary for a starting technician is somewhere around $40,000. That's not a lot of money these days. But I know technicians, and they do exist. There aren't a lot of them, but they do exist, that are earning six figures. Now, how do we reconcile the difference in wage gap? It's capability, basically. The more trained an individual is, if we invest in them, keep them trained, give them the tools and equipment that they need, they will start making more and more money. There's been a lot of conversation about the flat rate system these days. Does it need to be, revamped, that sort of thing? But the long and short of it is the opportunity that I found when I got into the industry, it is often not appreciated. And I think that's part of the problem for us attracting individuals. And therein lies the challenge. Okay, we have to develop these individuals so that they have an opportunity to make the kind of income that will be attractive to them, okay, to come into the industry. Most of the technicians I know, if they're not making, $85,000, $90,000 a year, they're looking for another job, because it's not their fault that they're not making the money. It's having the work come through the door. And this brings us back to, well, are you attracting customers? Do they trust you? Are they bringing their vehicles into you? It all kind of works together. It's one big ecosystem.
So if the service department is strategically important to dealerships, There's a bunch of technicians who are going to be retiring soon. The people who you need to bring into your organization need really good training, etc. What's your advice to dealerships? What should they be doing to be able to really build an amazing service department?
2 words: get involved. Back in the day, when we relied on word of mouth, and we still do to some degree, to attract qualified people. That's fine when there's a lot of them out there. There aren't anymore. But this is where what I'm doing is so important to me personally. Because by being involved at the school level through something called an advisory committee, every CTE program that's accredited has an advisory committee. It's part of the requirements. The members of that advisory committee are local businesses, and I stress the word local, okay? You find a school, a CTE program, automotive, collision, and truck exist, whatever level you're at or whatever you need. Having, for example, a service consultant or a service manager involved in an advisory committee gives them the opportunity to not only introduce their dealership to the students as a possible employer, but it gives them a chance to evaluate which of those students are the best and the brightest that they can attract into their business and invest in. The people that are coming out of programs right now understand that they're highly trained. They understand completely that they're in demand. And that young individual sitting in front of you being interviewed is probably interviewing you as well, because they want to know, they're looking for not just a job, they're looking for a career. But it's important to understand that if you're going to attract the right individuals, they tend to listen to their peers. We definitely have to make the parents understand that this is an opportunity for their children, to grow and to have a great life. But it's also important that you have not just your service manager in there, but maybe the shop foreman or maybe one of your technicians involved. Having another young person who graduated from a high school program, working at a dealership and doing well on an advisory committee for that school is the best advertisement you can have for the worth of what you're offering as an employer. So the opportunities are out there, but they have to be communicated properly. And the only way you can do that is to get involved. For too long, we've relied on just stealing the best technicians from other businesses. That's a zero-sum game. At some point, if you stole it from somebody else is going to steal them from you. In many ways, we have to get back to, now we're 20 years ago, okay, where we grew our own technicians. That's the name of the game now.
So, Tony, there's when you talk about training, talk to me a little bit about not the training program outside of a dealership, but inside of a dealership, both attracting young folks to come in and start learning the trade, or even taking in someone from a program that you described and bringing them into a dealership and training them up. Can you break down the training? If you owned a dealership today and you had one of these people come in, let's say a person who is not at all trained, and then let's talk about a person who comes in from one of your training programs. What would you do? Just break it down from what kind of skills would we be providing? How would you be thinking about their careers? And a little more kind of hands-on how you would develop this talent from your perspective.
Well, the first thing I do, as I had mentioned, would be to get involved with my local CTE program to have that feedstock coming in, okay, individuals that have some training. As far as an internal program goes, one of the things that the training programs at the high school and the post-secondary level, college level, rely on are internships and apprenticeships. There's a lot more internships and apprenticeships out there than there ever were before. So I would want to get involved with one of those programs as well. In fact, NADA just launched one. So you might want to look into that as well. One of the real benefits I think a dealership brings to the equation is the factory training that's available. In fact, many of the car manufacturers have programs like Ford's Asset Program and Honda PAC at the high school and college levels, where they're preparing the individuals there to work on their vehicles. Okay. Now talk about building loyalty. The training is available through the manufacturers, and that's great. But, there's these things called pre-owned vehicles that we have, where I'm in a Honda dealership, but a Ford just came in and it's a nice used car. So you have to make sure that their skills are broad enough based that they're going to be able to tackle whatever comes through the door. And some individuals, all they want to do is change brakes and shocks, and they're perfectly happy doing it. They're making enough money, so they're happy. Those people are going to be out there, and they're going to be loyal, and they're going to be a good employee for you forever. However, the ones that you need, the top-notch technicians with the most training and the ability to really diagnose a very complex computer-controlled system, they're gold. And you really have to go the extra mile to make sure that you are keeping them at the top of their game. And there's an old saying, what happens if I train them and they leave? Well, what happens if you don't train them and they stay? There's a certain liability involved with making sure that individuals are qualified, certified, and can prove it. And I think if I was building a program, for 3 things I would do: get involved with my local CTE program, get involved with them through an internship or an apprenticeship program. And then once I have them on board, make sure that they understand that I put them into a career development process that will make them understand that they're as valuable to me as that job is to them.
I think that is, it's really, really good advice. And so, Tony, I'm going to take a step back and summarize for us the 3 insights I'm taking away from our discussion here. My first takeaway, my first insight is that service departments way back in the past were sometimes thought about as necessary evils, but even if they were important to the dealership, it was mostly after the fact. You had technicians that did not require much training. They would come in to help customers service their cars. But now the game has changed, and it's changed for a variety of reasons. And this comes from this podcast, but also other podcasts I've done with other guests. Customers are holding on to their cars for longer. There's an affordability crisis. There's more need for servicing. And one of the things that is incredibly important is that the way the customers look at a dealership is going to be through the service department. The way in which the service department handles them, looks after them, and looks after the car and does all the work is going to be incredibly important to the repeat customers that need to come to the store, plus the steady income that a dealer gets from the service department is going to bite them through the ups and downs of the selling cycle. So the service department has become a very strong strategic part of a dealership that every dealership needs to pay attention to. My second insight is, for the service department to do well, you need amazing talent, which is obvious, but there isn't much of that to go around right now for a variety of reasons. Now it is, from what you said, it's easy to find warm bodies, but our cars have become much more complex, so they need way more training than they had previously, even to do simple things like oil changes, etc. But there's many more complicated things that they need to do, run diagnostics and so on and so forth. They need to get trained on that. And then there's another piece of the training, which has got to do with their EQ and their empathy and their ways of dealing with customers. So there's a whole different skill set that is required, which is a combination of the people who are sitting in the service department and then also the technicians who are actually working on the car. It's harder to find those kind of people. And that's the gap that you want to get ahead of, because it is a strategic part of your dealership. And then the third insight is to be able to get there, to be able to find the right technicians. One needs to get involved. It is not good enough to steal them from someone else. That's not going to be long-term or successful kind of a strategy. But investing in this area in a variety of ways, getting the dealerships on advisory committees, so that they are watching the students, getting the internships and so on. But once they hire the students and the incoming technicians, making sure that they don't just let them go at that point, but continue to invest in them, talk up to them about career advancement, making them more and more skilled so that both the technicians get a chance to earn more money because you're just getting more business, but also that is the way in which you can make the dealership to do way better than it would otherwise do. So the net is that the service department is a very strategic part of the dealership. It's become way more strategic than it used to be previously. And astute dealerships are paying much more attention to that part of the business and not just an afterthought. But Tony, I really want to thank you for this conversation. I know we are going to be connecting more in the future, but you are doing an incredible job and really adding to the value of keeping our industry healthy. And I want to thank you for that.
Well, Sanjiv, thank you. It has been a pleasure working with you. And I'll say one last thing, if I could. If you're a dealer now and you're saying to myself, well, does this make sense to me? How do I find these schools? Simply go to the ASE Education Foundation website, and there's a program locator there. You can just plug in your zip code, and it'll show you all the schools in a 50 or 100-mile radius, whatever you want to set. And that's how you can make your first connections if you're not sure how to get involved. So
that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Tony. Really a pleasure.
Sanjiv, it has been a pleasure. Take care.
The dealers who win turn insights into action. Now's the time to take the lead. This has been 3 Key Insights with Sanjiv Yajnik. We'll see you next time. The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast are solely their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Capital One Auto, Capital One NA, or its affiliates. This content is provided for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to serve as financial, legal, tax, or business advice. Viewers should consult their own independent professionals regarding their specific individual or business needs.